So here is part 2 of the video, and this is called the anticipatory set. The anticipatory set is a fancy name for what are you going to do to hook the students, to get them interested, to make them say inside, I'm interested in what's going to happen here today. Ooh, I want to do this. That's your anticipatory set. So we're going to go over here again to the far left side. I call this the left gray column menu. And we're going to click on our Google Doc lesson plans again. We're going to click on the lesson plan example. Going to double click on that and open this up. We have finished the first page, which was basically our cover page. We are on the second page and we are still on our face-to-face lesson plan. We have already written our classroom expectations, and I am reminding everyone that on a real lesson plan in real life, you probably would not add your classroom expectations there, but we're doing it because we're learning. And I want you to think about what kind of environment works best with the kind of lesson that I'm teaching. Do I want students to talk to one another? If so, what are the parameters for that voice level, for the tone, for the way they speak to one another? That's why I want you to put your expectations on this lesson plan so that you can be in the mindset of thinking about your classroom environment for the particular lesson that you're planning. Let's talk about the anticipatory set. I said before that this is a way that you're going to hook your audience. Here's the question that you're asking. Let's look here. In what way can you introduce the lesson that draws in the student interest and their experiences? That's the crux of the anticipatory set. And people can call it all kinds of different things. As a matter of fact, there are teachers who are phenomenal teachers who may not have ever even heard of these words in particular, but they know what you're talking about. They know because they do it. They do something to draw in their students, to get their attention, to make them say, wow, I want to know what we're going to do today. So we're going to go to a generic template that doesn't belong to anybody in the class. You can't see this link, but I'm going to click down here. So I'm going to open that up. This is the one I've just been kind of practicing on a little bit. And we're going to scroll down to the anticipatory set section because I want to call your attention once more to this link that says Writing Classroom Expectations and Anticipatory Set. When you click on that, you're going to get that window. Click on it again and it will open up. We've already done our classroom expectations for face-to-face and online. Here is the anticipatory set section. And here I have written out some steps that I followed to make my lesson plan example for you. So here's a link to the lesson plan example. And here is my first step. So first I reviewed the context of this student expectation, which is the knowledge and skill. Now remember, we went to our lesson plan and we selected a knowledge and skill and we selected a student expectation. When you click on this link, it's going to take you to my lesson plan example. And I want to scroll back up to our cover page and remind you of what my lesson plan example, student expectation, and knowledge and skill were. Let's do the knowledge and skill first. Response skills, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking using multiple texts. The student responds to an increasingly challenging variety of sources that are read, heard, or viewed. The student is expected to use text evidence to support an appropriate response. Here are the steps that I followed to make my anticipatory set for this set of TEKS. First, I reviewed the context of the student expectation, and that's the knowledge and skill. I noticed that listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking, these response skills, students are supposed to be able to use all of that, to do all of that during this lesson. I think for my lesson today, we may not do all of those today, but we will do some of those. Now, the importance of that is I can't just say we won't do all of those, period. They have to listen, speak, read, write, and think in order to accomplish this mission, in order to master this objective that I'm going to show that I wrote. So I can't say that, oh, we're just going to do listening and speaking during this lesson and never return to do reading, writing, and thinking. If I do that, then my lesson as a whole is not aligned. What I could do is say, we've only got 45 minutes, so I will do part of this today and part of this tomorrow. Now, that's fine. But let's get back to how we build our anticipatory set. So I'm looking at the different skills they've got to use: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. Okay. They also must use multiple texts. Well, now I know I'm probably going to have to talk with my students about that word text. Most students connect text to something that they read on their phones, and that is a text. However, multiple texts in this context means all the different things that we read. So we read movies, okay? That's a kind of text. We obviously read books, articles, novels. That's obviously text. When you go to visit a play, or you go to view a play or enjoy a play, that's text. Body language is text. We read all of these things because from all of those sources, we gain messages, we receive messages, we interpret messages. So that's one thing we'll be making sure that our students understand, is that there are a number of different types of texts. And this particular TEK is saying we must use multiple texts. So after I considered my knowledge and skill and exactly what that meant, I also wanted to look at my student expectation. Now, before we leave that knowledge and skill, I need to point out that students will respond to an increasingly challenging variety of sources. So as I teach this lesson over a period of time, I'm definitely going to teach it in this one session, but I'm going to be revisiting this quite a bit because each time I introduce a text, that text needs to be increasingly challenging. Now, for our purposes, for this lesson example, we're only going to show just one experience for our students. But please know that this is the kind of TEK that is continually woven throughout all of our students' lessons for the year. And so we will be increasingly making those texts more challenging that they encounter. Next, let's look at my student expectation. And the student expectation says use text evidence in the text, all those different kinds of texts, to support an appropriate response. So now I'm thinking, I've got to use multiple texts that they read, listen to, things that they'll be speaking, all of those different ways of input and output. They'll be using all of that, multiple texts, in order to support appropriate responses. So here is my learning objective that I wrote. After reading and hearing passages from the text entitled Affirming Students' Right to Their Own Language, the student will be able to use text evidence to support appropriate responses with at least 95% accuracy. Next, I thought about my multiple texts and I think, okay, so for my anticipatory set, I think I'm going to use a movie clip. That is a text. And I decided to use a movie clip from the movie called Facing the Giants. And from that movie clip, what I will do for my anticipatory set is I will ask my students questions based upon that movie, and then I will ask them, after they see that short little clip, what was it in the clip that told you that that was the correct answer? That would be a way of them supporting their answers. Now, I'm not teaching my students a full lesson in my anticipatory set, But what I am doing is showing them very briefly through a movie, which I think they'll be interested in, how they will use this every day. This is something that they use on a daily basis, being able to support answers from text, even if that text is a movie. So let's go back over to my example lesson plan. So under anticipatory set, I said the instructor will introduce the lesson by paraphrasing the objective. Paraphrasing, everyone, we're going to use kid language. So most principals will ask you to write your objective up on the board. And they will be able to go into your classrooms when they do walkthroughs. They should be able to see what your goal is for the day. And usually, sometimes principals will even ask the students, what are you supposed to be doing today? Because they want the students to be able to know the purpose of their learning for that day. Not all principals do that, but I have known several to do that, and I've done that myself. But I am going to state my objective in kid terms, so they will be able to say in their own words what they are expected to learn that day. So I'll say something like, students, today we're going to use different kinds of texts. Different kinds of texts, not just the ones that you see on your phone, but some that you might read in a book, some that you may see in a movie, some that you may see in an article, texts that you may experience when you go and see a play. All of those are examples of texts. And we're going to be able to read those texts and come up with responses that we can support by going back to those texts. And so I'll tell them about my little movie clip. My movie clip is called Facing the Giants. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a great film. And from that scene, I will come up with some questions. They will be able to answer them because I'm going to set them up so that they can answer them very easily. I won't come up with 10 or 15 because this is just an anticipatory set. I'm just warming them up. I'm just getting them interested. Now, what is interesting about this particular anticipatory set is it's a football scene. And as you are reading my example of an anticipatory set, this is a live link so that when you click it, it takes you directly to that scene.
So, Coach, how strong is Westview this year?
Now, we won't watch that film right now. It's about 3 or 4 minutes long. Once they finish, then I will continue with what I have here. The instructor will ask the students to share in pairs their responses to some questions that I will ask. Students will support their statements about the clip with evidence from the movie. For example, I might say at the beginning of the scene, Brock's confidence in winning the game was high. I may ask my students, is that a true statement or is that a false statement? My students will give me an answer. And then I will ask them, how do you know that? Was there something that you saw? Was there something that you heard? Can you tell me about the film, the piece of the film that let you know that? And we would get into a discussion. That would be my anticipatory set. If you could continue to read on your own the different scenarios that I've chosen to bring forth in my anticipatory set. And again, my students would have the opportunity to talk to one another, and they would have an opportunity to tell me, number one, the answers to those questions or to those prompts. And then they would be able to tell me, because I would ask them, how do you know? What is your evidence? Tell me, what did you see in that film that helped you know that that was the correct answer? Now, in everything that we do for this lesson, everything that we design for our students must be aligned. Now, we've already had a lesson on alignment, but that lesson on alignment wasn't meant to be experienced and then forgotten, because everything about our lesson must be aligned, even our anticipatory set. Notice that when I decided what my anticipatory set was, I went back to the original TEAC. I went to the knowledge and skill. I looked at how students were supposed to be listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. Even in my anticipatory set, I was able to fulfill a lot of those. They were listening to the movie. They were speaking to each other. They didn't necessarily read from a text. They did read from a movie. They didn't write for my anticipatory set, but they definitely were thinking. And what did they do? They used one of multiple texts that I will be using throughout this lesson. This happened to be a film. And they are going to, over time, respond to increasingly challenging variety of sources. So today it's a movie, and I'm going to also show them a text that we'll be reading called Affirming Students' Right to Their Own Language, which is definitely more challenging than watching the film. So I've met that as far as alignment is concerned as well. And even look here, it says the student responds to an increasingly challenging variety of sources that are read, heard, or viewed. Okay, so we're on the right track. Everything we've done so far is definitely aligned, even in our anticipatory set. We're not done. We've got to look at this student expectation again. Use text evidence to support an appropriate response. Well, I've already got my students primed for doing that because in my anticipatory set, I asked them to support their responses by things that they saw in the film. This is an important piece. Just like all the important pieces of our lesson, they must be aligned, even your anticipatory set. So my future teachers, your task is to write your anticipatory set, but yours will be based on your TEKS, the one that you chose, the knowledge and skill, and the student expectation that you selected for your lesson plan. So whether that's math or science, whatever grade you've selected, go to that grade, go to that subject, pick out one knowledge and skill. Remember, that's the statement that begins with the number. And pick out one of that knowledge and skills associated student expectation. And of course, you've already done that, and you've already written your objective, but I'm reminding you of that because that is how you are going to begin determining the best way to approach your way of hooking your students into that lesson, of making them interested. I advise that you follow the steps that I followed to come up with mine to write yours. Let's go to our lesson plan face-to-face portion. And in the section that says write your anticipatory set here, this is where it's going to go. Don't forget to look at that link that we just looked at together. And once you're satisfied with following those directions, you're, of course, free to erase my highlighted instructions here if you want to. That's not a requirement. And write the steps of your anticipatory set. And when you do, I want you to look at my example. My example is not just a sentence or two. I took my time and wrote out specifically what my anticipatory set entails. I bring that up because we did do some examples as a class in one of my online sessions. You can find what my class and I did during that online session in the example that we've been looking at in this breakout box here. And I do specify that because of the amount of time being short when we did this online together as a class, the example anticipatory sets that the students came up with are very, very brief. However, you need to be more specific and you need to write the details of your anticipatory set on your lesson plan. And that is why I provided this example for you here. Okay, so read that whole section that is right in this area here as your model to follow for your anticipatory set. You may look back at these examples that my class came up with. You may look back at those to help spur your creativity, get your thinking going. That's totally fine. But remember that when you're ready to write, you need to write in detail so that your details are very obvious when I read them and I can understand exactly what you mean. Now, don't forget, we also have to write an anticipatory set for our online live instruction. So that means after you have finished putting your anticipatory set steps right here, you're going to scroll on down until you get to the online live instructions section, and your anticipatory set steps for your online live instruction go here. Again, feel free to erase my directions as soon as you are finished looking at those. But the point of this is you have to think about, what if I needed to teach this exact same objective, this exact same set of teats in an online live instruction environment? Would I do my anticipatory set the exact same way? If not, how would I do it? There might be a situation where you could almost do it exactly the same, but you need to think about it, and that's the point of writing this section here. Well, everyone, that is how you write your anticipatory set. Let me know if you have any questions, and do a great job.